It was a moment that caught everyone off guard. A moment so raw, so real, that it silenced the studio and shook the internet. Denzel Washington, the legendary actor known for his composure, strength, and stoicism, was seen fighting back, tears, live on national television. But this wasn't about a movie. This wasn't a script. This was life. And the person on the other end of the phone, Ibrahim Traoré, the young revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso. As the interview began, everything was going smoothly. Denzel was speaking passionately about his latest film, reflecting on faith, family, and the meaning of legacy. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and admiration. The host praised his decades-long career, his awards, and his impact on culture. But what came next? No one, not the audience, not the host, and certainly not Denzel, could have predicted. Midway through the segment, the host paused. A production assistant handed her a note. With a curious smile, she turned to Denzel and said, "We have a surprise for you. Someone very special is on the line, and they've asked to speak with you." Denzel raised his eyebrows, visibly puzzled. "Who?" he asked. "Just listen," the host replied, placing an earpiece in his ear and activating the speaker so the viewers could hear as well. What followed was the soft, steady voice of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, speaking with grace and humility. "Mr. Washington," he began, "I hope I'm not interrupting. I know you are a very busy man, but I have watched you for years, not just on the screen, but off it. Your faith, your dignity, your refusal to compromise your values, it has inspired me and many young leaders across Africa." Denzel's expression changed instantly. His mouth opened slightly, his eyes softened. He leaned forward in his chair, visibly moved. Traoré continued, "Where I come from, we are fighting for something real, justice, dignity, self-determination. And when we look for strength, we sometimes look beyond our borders. Your words have often reminded me to stay grounded, to lead with love and strength, and not to fear the cost of truth." The studio was silent, not even a whisper. Then Denzel closed his eyes. His lips began to tremble. He whispered, "Thank you. Thank you, young man." Ibrahim Traoré, only 36 and already president of Burkina Faso, then added something that truly shook Denzel. "We are building schools in remote villages, and we named one after you, the Denzel Washington Leadership Academy. We wanted to show our youth what it means to stand tall, to believe in something higher than fame or power." That was the breaking point. Tears welled in Denzel's eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. A lump in his throat held back the words. Slowly, a tear slid down his cheek. The world watched a man so strong, so composed, simply surrender to emotion. Finally, he said, "You have no idea what that means to me. Sometimes you act, you speak, you live, and you don't know if anyone's really listening. You hope, you pray. But to hear this, from you, from where you are, that's grace. That's God." The call ended with mutual blessings and gratitude. Denzel, wiping his face with a tissue, turned back to the host. "That young man," he said, voice hoarse, "is the real leader, the real hero." Online, the reaction was immediate. Clips of the call went viral. People from around the world praised the exchange as a moment of unity, of humanity, of unexpected connection. Two men from entirely different worlds. One a Hollywood icon, the other a revolutionary African president, sharing a bond over purpose, integrity, and impact. In the days that followed, Denzel made a public statement. "Sometimes you go your whole life wondering if your work matters, and then a voice from a country you've never been to tells you that it does. I'm humbled, and I am inspired." Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré's message echoed through social media and youth organizations. Our heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry weapons. Sometimes they wear suits, speak softly, and change the world with art and principle. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a bridge between continents, between generations, between the seen and the unseen. Because in a world full of noise, sometimes it takes a quiet voice on a phone to remind us all that our lives, when lived with purpose, can reach far beyond what we ever imagined. Just as the world was still reeling from the emotional moment between Denzel Washington and Ibrahim Traoré, another powerful story emerged, this time involving the same young African leader and an entirely different icon, Malala Yousafzai. It happened at an international youth leadership summit in Geneva, Switzerland, an event where world changers, activists, and leaders gathered to speak not as politicians but as people. The focus was on education, peace, and resilience in the face of oppression. Among the panelists that day was Malala, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate, known for her courageous stand against the Taliban and her lifelong dedication to girls' education. Just before she took the stage, the organizers announced a surprise guest who would be joining virtually from Burkina Faso. The room, already buzzing, fell quiet as the live stream connected. Ibrahim Traoré appeared on the massive screen, not in a grand setting but from a modest office, seated at a simple wooden desk with the Burkinabe flag behind him. What followed was a moment of deep mutual respect between two of the world's most fearless young voices. Traoré began, "Malala, I grew up in a world very different from yours, but our pain and our mission feel the same. We have both looked tyranny in the eye. You with bullets and silence, me with poverty and corruption, and yet we both chose hope." Malala's eyes shimmered as she listened. Traoré continued, "You stood for girls when no one would. In my country, we have villages where girls still walk 10 miles just to attend class under trees. But because of your courage, we are building schools for them, and we're naming one of them the Malala Hope Institute." A gasp rippled through the room. Malala's hand went to her chest. She blinked rapidly, trying to absorb what she had just heard. The audience, a mix of students, diplomats, and activists, gave a standing ovation before she could even respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but resolute. "President Traoré," she said, "I have been given many honors in my life, but this, a school, a place where girls can dream and learn freely, this means more than any prize I've ever received." Then she paused as if collecting her thoughts. "To be seen, to be remembered, not for our pain but for our purpose, that is the true reward." The two then shared a brief conversation about policy, education, and how young leaders could reject the politics of division for the cause of dignity and learning. It wasn't just a diplomatic exchange, it was the birth of a powerful alliance. In the weeks that followed, images of girls from Burkina Faso smiling in front of a wooden sign that read, "Malala Hope Institute," began surfacing online. Many held chalkboards with handwritten messages, "Thank you, Malala. I am learning to lead and my voice matters." And across the globe, Malala shared those same photos with a caption that went viral. "You don't need to be from the same place to fight the same fight. Thank you, Ibrahim Traoré. Our courage is louder when it echoes." For once, social media wasn't filled with division or scandal, but with unity, with hope, with real leadership born not from wealth or power, but from pain turned into purpose. These stories, Denzel's tearful call, Malala's unexpected tribute, are not isolated. They're threads in a global fabric being quietly woven by those who still believe in truth, in sacrifice, and in the power of example. Because, in a world where so much is fake, these moments, they're real. They remind us who we are and who we could be. And just when it seemed the world had already witnessed the most unexpected and heartfelt moments sparked by Ibrahim Traoré's quiet revolution of values, another story emerged, this time involving someone who, until now, had never publicly spoken about African politics or youth leadership, Lionel Messi. It was during a press conference in Miami. Messi had just led Inter Miami to a major championship win. The crowd was electric, the press full of questions about his goals, assists, and retirement plans. But as Messi sat down, smiling and relaxed, a journalist asked something that no one expected. "Leo," she began, "you've inspired generations with your humility and leadership. There's a young president in Africa, Ibrahim Traoré, who's been citing you as a role model for calm leadership under pressure. He says your style of leading without shouting, your consistency and dignity, reflects what modern leadership should look like. Have you heard about this?" Messi, visibly surprised, paused. His smile softened into something more thoughtful. "Ibrahim Traoré?" he repeated. "Yes. I've heard his name recently." Then, he leaned forward and added something that shocked even his closest fans. "A few weeks ago," Messi said, "I received a letter, handwritten. It was from President Traoré. In it, he told me that in moments of great difficulty, when he faces threats, chaos, or uncertainty, he sometimes watches old Barcelona matches, not for the goals, but for the way I played, quiet, focused, with heart. He said, 'That's how I want to lead my people.'" There was a pause in the room. No one was expecting Messi to be moved, but he was. "I don't usually talk about things like this," he continued. "But that letter, it really touched me, because I've always tried to lead by example, and to know that someone who is literally fighting for the future of his country finds strength in the way I move on a football pitch, that's humbling." He looked around the room, his voice quiet but clear. "We play for trophies. He leads for lives." Messi then reached into his bag and pulled out a laminated copy of the letter, clearly kept with care. He ended the letter by saying, "The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more grace. You showed me that." I'll never forget that line. In that moment, sports stopped being just sports. Politics stopped being just politics. The world was reminded that influence travels in unexpected directions, and that sometimes the grace of a football legend can inspire the courage of a revolutionary. Later that night, Messi posted a rare message on Instagram. "Thank you, President Ibrahim Traoré. Leadership is not always loud. Sometimes, it's how you move, not what you say." Traoré responded in kind through his country's official page. "True champions wear humility like a jersey. Gracias, Leo." And just like that, fans across the globe, from Buenos Aires to Ouagadougou, began sharing clips of Messi's quiet moments on the pitch, overlaid with Traoré's speeches. Two men from different worlds, different languages, different arenas. Yet somehow the same message. You don't need to scream to lead. You don't need to conquer to inspire. And sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the softest steps, and then there was Oprah. The media titan, philanthropist, and queen of soul-stirring conversations was preparing for a special episode of Super Soul Sunday. The theme? Modern courage, leading with purpose. Producers had lined up global changemakers, authors, activists, spiritual leaders, but as the guest list was finalized, Oprah herself made a bold request. "I want to speak to that young president in Africa, the one everyone's whispering about, Ibrahim Traoré." At first, her team wasn't sure it was possible. He wasn't a celebrity chasing cameras. In fact, he rarely spoke to international media. But days later, a video call was arranged. No entourages, no pre-scripted sound bites. Just Oprah and Traoré, heart to heart. The interview was intimate, aired across the world and watched by millions. Oprah, sitting in her signature garden set, greeted him warmly. "President Traoré," she began, "what you're doing, leading at such a young age, standing up to pressure, refusing to sell your soul to the highest bidder, that's a level of integrity we don't often see in power. Where does that come from?" Traoré smiled humbly. His voice was calm. "It comes from the stories of my mother. She didn't go to school, but she taught me the weight of truth. She told me, A man with a spine will never walk bent even when the world tells him to bow. Oprah paused, visibly moved. That's something my grandmother would have said, she replied softly. Then she leaned forward. But tell me, when the pressure gets heavy, when you're alone at night, what do you turn to? Traoré didn't hesitate. Books, and sometimes your interviews. Oprah was taken aback. There's one moment I go back to often, he said, when you asked Maya Angelou what she thinks about the legacy of her words, and she said, people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That quote changed me. It reminded me that my people may not remember every law I sign, but they'll remember if I made them feel safe, dignified, free. Silence followed. Oprah wiped a tear from her eye. I've interviewed presidents, kings, billionaires, but I've never heard a sitting head of state quote Maya Angelou like that, with reverence, not just memory. Then she said something no one expected. You've reminded me why I started this show in the first place, not to chase fame, but to illuminate the souls still fighting in the dark. By the time the interview aired, social media lit up, not with outrage, not with gossip, but with gratitude. Young leaders shared clips of Traoré's words, elders in churches and mosques played his quotes after sermons. Educators downloaded the episode to show their students. In one viral post, a young girl from Detroit tweeted, I just saw a president quote Maya Angelou on Oprah. Maybe there's still hope for this world. Traoré responded the next day. There is always hope, especially when young girls believe again. And just like that, 2 generations, one shaped by Mississippi soil, the other by Burkina dust, found a bridge. Not through power, not through politics, but through soul. And then came the letter, the one no one saw coming. From none other than His Holiness Pope Francis. It began quietly, away from flashing cameras and breaking news. It started with a private delivery to the Burkina embassy at the Vatican, a sealed envelope bearing the papal insignia. Inside was a handwritten note addressed directly to President Ibrahim Traoré. Weeks later, the contents would become public and touch millions. The letter read, in part, My dear brother in leadership, I have been watching from afar, not as a judge of your choices, but as a witness to your courage. In the Gospels, we are taught that the shepherd must protect the flock even when wolves circle. I see in you a shepherd, not of privilege, but of protection. President Traoré, deeply moved, responded not through an official press conference, but with a handwritten letter of his own, carried by a humble courier back to Rome. In it he wrote, Your Holiness, I am merely a servant of my people. If I speak loudly, it is because my people have been silenced for too long. If I walk defiantly, it is only because I carry generations who were told to crawl. But what followed was even more powerful. At his weekly Angelus from St. Peter's Square, with thousands in attendance and millions watching live, Pope Francis did something unprecedented. He paused his prepared homily. Then, with both hands resting gently on the lectern, he looked out into the crowd and said, Today I speak not only to Catholics, but to all who believe in justice. There is a young leader in Burkina Faso, a country too often ignored by the powerful, whose example reminds us of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. President Ibrahim Traoré, may you walk your path, not with fear but with divine conviction. You are not alone. A hush fell over the square. The world had just heard the spiritual leader of 1.3 billion people not praise military might, but moral clarity. Not polished power, but raw principle. Back in Burkina Faso, church bells rang in towns that had never been mentioned on global stages. Muslim imams, Christian priests, and traditional elders gathered together for a national day of prayer, not for politics, but for unity, for peace, for the soul of the country. Children, we're taught the meaning of the Pope's words in schools. The letter was read aloud in mosques. Graffiti artists painted murals of Traoré alongside a white dove and the words, "Lead us in truth." And once again, across cultures, across religions, across continents, the message echoed. When the world forgets the poor, when power ignores the just, when fear overshadows faith, sometimes the voice of a farmer's son, standing barefoot in the dust, can still reach the highest balcony of the Vatican. Because true leadership is not given, it is recognized.